Santina Star Beats. Santina Star Beats. Santina Star Beats.
If I can't make them stay a little longer, stay here, stay straight, though we feel it.
Magni, make it blessed.
They hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate. They hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate. Yeah. They hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate. They hate when you elevate. Yeah. I had to elevate. I'm way up, way too fly. Yeah, I'm feeling myself. Ain't no chance I'm coming down. No, got a soul view to myself. Yeah. Why would I give it up? Why do they wanna come take my place? I work too hard for it, don't need a replacement. This my vocation. Now I got rollies all in rotation. Hop on a jet just to take a vacation. Remember the moments was trapped in the basement. Now the hard work is all taking me places. Water all bad like we trapped in the matrix. Bet on myself and go ball out in Vegas. Living a life like I'm rich and I'm famous. Don't see the grind that I know that it came with. I ain't making It feel like I'm floating, I'm lost in the moment, I swear I could levitate. They never believed that I would really fly, I had to go demonstrate. I had to set them straight. They hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate. They hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate. Yeah, they hate when you elevate, elevate, elevate.
Burn Live, y'all. Marijuana keeping y'all connected. Hashtagging these red eyes, changing the viewers. I read, keeping underage, smoking on social media. Definitely killing myself for your entertainment. Sitting here with friends and family, starting a cannabisation. Welcome to another Burn Live show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I appreciate everybody coming in. They left kind of early, but I understand we're going to be here for a while. We are going to be here for a while. We're going to be going over the president, vice president debate tonight. We're going to be going over a couple of other stories that will be going on. I'll talk a little bit about the WNBA sports because that's actually happening right now, where you got the Aces and the Liberty are playing in the second quarter. Is at halftime. Last time I checked, the Aces were up. Last time I checked, Aces were up. Oh, Aces are up by 29-28 with 7:20 in the second quarter. This is semifinals to the WNBA, which has been a beautiful season this year. I enjoyed every bit of it. You also got the WNBA off season, which is highly anticipated right now. Like I said, you got the debate that's happening tonight. Everybody anticipating. Well, the debate looks like it's happening in 53 minutes. The debate is happening in 53 minutes. So in 53 minutes, I will be discussing other things. Shout out to my people on Rumble. They've been getting on my case about not giving proper shout outs. So shout out to Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and all those good attributes. Hold on one second. It's a little bit better. I would change the background as the sun go down a little bit. I will leave the blind. We can use the background when it get later on today in the evening. Welcome, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Where to start? I would like to start. Oh. First things first, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just go into some marijuana weed stories, like what I told you we would definitely start doing from here on out. It's definitely starting off day with marijuana stories and news coverage and stuff like that. So definitely get your blunts, joints, weed, whatever you're smoking on. Please get comfortable. Please put your phone on the charger. It's going to be a long day. My first two stories are going to be from Minnesota and Arkansas. Weed is legal in Minnesota, which we all know. They want to know, should it stay medical or should it go recreational? Hold on, with Minnesota, what does it mean for medical? What does it mean for medical now that it's recreational in Minnesota? Just probably like a little distance of a discount. That's how it was out here in Nevada. It was just a little discount. It was a little discount for people that was out here when they got their weed, car versus medical. It wasn't a real big issue like that. Not to me, it was, but other states it might be different. So let's go out here to Minnesota. See what they
Legally sell recreational weed. There are questions of what that means for medicinal marijuana.
As WCCO's Jonah Kaplan found out, there are two key reasons why patients might still prefer going green at a medical dispensary.
There's a reason why economists think Minnesota's cannabis industry could soon be worth billions. In 2015, roughly 840 people enrolled in the state's first medical marijuana program. In 2024, it's more than 48,000. They shop at 15 dispensaries across the state.
I had such a stigma on it, and when I gave it a try, I will never go back. I will always be on medical marijuana.
Chelsea Swanson uses marijuana to relieve chronic pain and IBS, among other symptoms. Today, she drives more than a half hour from her home in St. Francis to this dispensary in New Hope. Starting next year, when selling recreational weed becomes legal, she might not have to drive so far or go through any regulatory process to buy what she wants. Swanson, though, says she's sticking with what she knows.
What you are getting here is top quality. It is something that is grown and made in Minnesota.
That's true, but state officials and prospective retailers stress that Minnesota's medical marijuana industry is the model for what's to come. Everything seed to sale happens in Minnesota. It's generally the same plant, grown the same way, with the same THC content, and the same safety standards. Still, there are two key differences. One, recreational pot will be taxed, medical, tax-free. Second, recreational products will have limits on potency and possession. Medical won't.
Another bonus for medical marijuana.
We had a case not too long ago where a kid hit some edibles and took him to school and wasn't feeling good. Okay, that's just one case. We had another case where a woman stabbed her boyfriend 47 times because he did not know the potency of the weed. And so when I seen this breakdown of what's the difference between recreational and medical, recreational is going to have taxes, medical is non-tax. So then you looking at, well, I'm looking at Minnesota and I'm like, okay, so where's the medical taxes going to? So are y'all redistributing back into the community? Are y'all putting it into the schools? Are y'all putting it into the streets? If y'all getting non-taxed, then what's up? And then this right here, where there's no limit on the THC potency, you're going to be able to bring up other cases with people and they having disturbed disorders. And they're going to be able to get away with whatever committed to the necessity of their actions. Meaning, if the potency is high, over 30, I think it's what, 33% is 35, 30. If anything over 40% THC high level, you're going to have the option to do anything and like, all right, you know what? The potency was too high. I wasn't on my right mind. Like I said, this case happened in Denver where a lady stabbed her boyfriend 47 times. She said she wasn't in her right mind. The THC level was higher than normal. So you're saying medical is going to be higher than normal no matter what. I just want to point that out.
Potency and possession. Medical won't.
Another bonus for medical marijuana patients, that $200 fee that you've been paying, the annual enrollment fee, yeah, that's gone starting next year. So it all seems like a good deal, right? Well, except if you look at the experience of other states who've legalized weed. Because in those states, the medical marijuana industry tanks.
Let's just look at Michigan. In August, medical sales totaled $1.2 million. Recreational, $294 million. In Minnesota, it could be a while before retail dispensaries open, but surging demand for hemp-derived THC could be a sign of things to come. Kevin Swan recently opened North Star THC in Plymouth. His sales are up, but so are questions about whether his store will turn into a dispensary.
I get a high volume of people asking if flower is going to be available or if I'm going to sell it. So there will be a portion of my customers who don't come back here. But I also see people saying, I don't want to smoke.
For Chelsea Swanson, it doesn't matter what other people choose. She knows what she wants and what she trusts. She'll keep shopping here.
Can't mess around with health at all.
In Minneapolis, Jonah Kaplan, WCCO News.
The average age of medical marijuana patients in Minnesota is about 47, but among the 48,000 currently enrolled in the program, more than 400 are children ages 5 to 17. Marijuana patients in Minnesota is about 47, but among the 48,000 currently enrolled in the program, more than 400 are children ages 5 to 17.
What program is you got 5 to 17-year-olds, 5 to 47-year-olds in a medical marijuana program? for indulging in weed. Now, unless these high cases of stroke and anxiety, okay, I get it. All right, I apologize, but it was just not too long ago, bro. I used to get in trouble with having underage kids off social media. That's why I had the hashtag Red Eye, and I started the movement what I started because of the simple fact of that. Now you got these programs, and I know a person, if they was watching, would vouch for me. Like, man, I used to get in trouble. I used to get strikes and all type of stuff. Now you got kids low as 5-year-old, five, as you just seen in Minnesota, that are in a marijuana program and stuff like that. But yet again, I bet you, if we talked about it on my channel, or we brought it up on the channel, or we brought a kid here, 5-year-old kid here, I would get restricted. This is what I be talking about when it comes to this age and stuff like that. And as we get older and we learn things change. But I remember a lot of people that did want to change. I used to talk about this all the time. A lot of people did not want to change. They looked at it very, very bad, and they looked at me like I was a bad guy and stuff like that. And I was just like, man, we got to learn. You know what I'm saying? I think it's very important to educate and sit down and have a discussion about weed, especially for people that don't know. If you don't know, we need to have the discussion. We need to sit down. We need to talk. All right? We're going out here to Arkansas, y'all. Going out here to Arkansas for the next story real quick. Let's get into it.
Arkansas voters has been rejected. The Secretary of State announcing today that the group hoping to expand medical marijuana access has failed to meet the requirements needed. THV 11's Rebecca Brown joins us in studio tonight. Rebecca, what was this reason for the rejection, and what does this mean for voters come November?
Well, first, Faith, since the ballots have already been prepared, you will see the proposal on your ballot still. But regardless of what you vote, it will not count.
There is no removing those issues off the ballot at this time. You just won't see the results now on election night.
Just weeks away from early voting, and the Secretary of State, John Thurston, took a group seeking to expand medical marijuana access by surprise. Monday, he announced Arkansas for Patient Access fell short of the signature requirement. While this may have been a surprise for some, Pulaski County Election Coordinator Amanda Dickens says it's not uncommon for it to happen this close to Election Day.
It happens, like I said, just about every general election when we have all these issues on the ballot.
The amendment would have expanded the list of qualifying medical conditions for medical marijuana and allowed more medical professionals to approve patients. But to make it on the ballot, they needed to have more than 90,000 qualified signatures. Arkansas for Patient Access, or APA, says they submitted more than 150,000. But in a letter sent to us by the Secretary of State, he says during the group's cure period, only 10,521 were valid, putting the group at just over 88,000. In response to the decision, APA saying in part, quote, excluding 20,000 signatures collected during the cure period due to an arbitrary last-minute clerical rule change is unfair. It's a technicality about paid canvassers, one that legal expert Rob Steinbuck says we've seen time and time again.
And the question that became presented in a variety of these ballot initiatives was whether or not the paid canvassers, the supervisors of the paid canvassers themselves, could make certain certifications, or if that duty was non-delegable from the person who had submitted the initial ballot question. And that has not been resolved.
Steinbuck adding that this is similar to what we're seeing right now in the casino amendment.
So that's what remains the open issue. And since it remains open at the Supreme Court, the Secretary of State said he won't count those signatures unless he's told otherwise by the Supreme Court.
After Thurston's announcement, Arkansas for Patient Access said they will pursue legal action. We have the full statements from the Secretary of State and APA online. Reporting in the studio, I'm Rebecca Brown.
All right, Rebecca, thank you. It's a good time to remind you that the deadline to register to vote is now just a week away.
Boy, she talking about it's a good time to remind you about voting when something that I bet you good 63% of people in Arkansas probably smoke weed. From what I've been seeing, a good percentage of people smoke weed in these other states. And for you to say that, oh yeah, making it recreational is going to be out there on the ballot. It's going to be there. But if you vote on it, it's not going to mean nothing. You can't do nothing about it. It's a little alarming, a little heartbreaking there, a little under the weather. As far as what you would want, I do understand why people would look at this situation and be like, yeah. I'm a little skeptical of everything. You got the right. You got the right. You got the right. You got the right to party. I don't know. How would y'all feel if you was Destiny dying to get recreational weed in your state and it finally got on the ballot, at least to the ballot, and then you hear what 40 days out before the election that, hey, you know what, it's not gonna be on there. I know if Democrats are watching my show, which I don't know, they'd be happy to hear this from Kamala.
To jail for smoking weed. And we know historically what that has meant and who has gone to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Second, I just think we have come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing this behavior. And I've actually, this is not a new position for me. I have felt for a long time we need to legalize it. So that's where I am on that. I just feel strongly people should not be going to jail for smoking.
Look how, boy, it made me want to go look up that interview that I heard. I'll probably do it another day. Definitely do it another day. That I heard about her on All the Smoke, and that she had an interview and that she was just dragging along in the conversation and basically tossed up word salad to not really explain to us or anybody what was going on. That's just what I was hearing. So we covered security guard doing an armed robbery, get attacked at dispensary. Come on, y'all. You know we got to go there. I tell y'all, man, even though it's recreational and all these stories look good, these stories ain't looking too good. For real. When it comes to what's going on in the marijuana industry, these stories is not looking too
Frank,
damn
good morning.
good.
Well, the two suspects in this case, they are still at large in this really a very sad situation. This security guard, he was working the overnight shift when the two suspects, they came in, they wanted to rob the place. They were armed and ended up shooting that security guard. Now, take a look behind me. This is the scene here, and Whittier Boulevard still closed off as they look for the suspects, and we try to get some more information regarding these people. The business is a marijuana dispensary. It's the one with the green lights and the green cross at the door. It is located here on Whittier Boulevard, just off of Garfield in the city of Montebello. The 911 call came from an employee working at the time as well. It was around 2 this morning when deputies got here. They found the victim suffering from at least one gunshot wound. Firefighters and paramedics also arriving on scene and unfortunately pronouncing the victim dead. According to the sheriff's department, an employee was also at the business overnight, but they were not injured. We're told some sort of altercation took place between the two suspects who walked into the business and shot the security guard.
Two male gunmen entered, attempted to rob the location. A shooting occurred, and as a result, the security guard was fatally shot. The males fled the location in what is believed to be a dark-colored SUV.
Family of the victim hearing about the tragic news showed up here at the dispensary overnight. We're waiting to get some more information regarding the victim. He has not yet been identified. Now back out here live, as you can see, it is closed off here pending the investigation. We're trying to get some more information regarding the suspects in this case. But that is the very latest for now. I'm Lena Bourbon reporting live here in the city of Montebello, KTLA 5 News.
I understand covering these marijuana news are not going to be good. I keep trying to tell y'all this. These marijuana news stories aren't going to always be good. I guess that's why a lot of people like, I don't watch the news. The news is never good. But if we're not informed of what's going on, then what should we be informed of? Does it really matter what goes on? Do we need to know about things that go on in your neighborhood? Do we need to know about crime and laws and the little things that happen around your neighborhood? The Girl Scout cookies and all the other good news. But like I said, this is cannabis. Covering a lot of cannabis news. Oh, y'all, I actually found the interview of Kamala Harris and all the smoke. Actually found it.
Our biggest guest, I've been corrected, Miss Madam Vice President.
You know what? I didn't even think they was going to air it. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yo. Bro, they're not gonna put it on TV.
What?
The debate.
I got the debate. We still got 30 minutes. I'm talking about.
Oh,
this
you told me
right
8:30.
here. Hey, I thought it was gonna be 8:30. I'm looking at the time right now. It's still saying 30 minutes. But like I'm saying, this right here is a podcast. I don't know if you've been hearing that Kamala Harris need to get out more, need to really start trying to get familiar with the people. So she went out and had this interview with all the smokes with these two ex-NBA players. You know, one from the Spurs, one from the Clippers and stuff like that. Well, Clippers, Lakers, depending on if you know basketball and know these people's background. So, but the thing is, Kamala Harris went on here and they had an interview. And instead of having an interview like what me and you would expect y'all to have of a presidency, you know, this is the president, I'm going to ask the president some questions. They asked her questions, but they didn't do no follow-up questions. She did a lot of word salad, tossing around different questions and different answers and stuff like that. They actually do have it broke down because they had specific questions they were gonna ask.
What about
So
the election?
Yeah, about Kamala Harris. So I'm gonna get into this one real quick. The one where she's the plan to improve the economy.
Okay.
Small business, black business. We actually just started our business in January, so we've grown from a show to a whole entire company. What is your economic plan moving forward for people who are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling for groceries and rent and homeowners?
So look, I grew up So my sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a
Remember, the question is, what are you going to do for homeowners, small businesses, first-time buyers of houses?
That's the question.
child care center. That child care center was actually owned by a woman who lived 2 doors down from us, Mrs. Shelton, who was, by all of our accounts and feelings, our second mother. She helped raise us. And so she was a small business owner. So I'll start with the small business, and congratulations on what you guys have done. I, from a child, knew who our small business owners are, right? I mean, you're business leaders, but you're also...
James.
Yeah.
She just congratulated these two. Hold on. I want to put their picture up there. Yeah, that's the best one. She congratulated two NBA players. They got championships. One got I know one of them got a championship with Kobe Bryant, right?
Kobe Bryant did.
So you just congratulate small business. But these guys are not poor. These guys are not living paycheck to paycheck.
No.
But yet again, this tax cut, which people think is going to go to middle class and the poor, are going to go to small rich people who are still successful, who got money, who really don't need to work, who just trying to find something to do and grow their economy and grow their business, grow their brand. I totally get it. Notice, and I rewind it so we can play it over. Notice how he said, we just started our business. We went from a podcast to a business now.
What business is
been
that?
a business.
And rent and homeowners.
So, look, I grew up, so my sister and I were raised by our mother. We lived for a long time in an apartment on top of a child care center. That child care center was actually owned by a woman who lived 2 doors down from us, Mrs. Shelton, who was, by all of our accounts and feelings, our second mother. She helped raise us. And so she was a small business owner. So I'll start with the small business, and congratulations on what you guys have done. I, from a child, knew who our small business owners are, right? I mean, you're business leaders, but you're also civic leaders. You take seriously your voice and how you can mentor, how you can grow, right? Communities and the sense of communities. I love our small businesses. And so a lot of my work in terms of building and growing the economy has focused on small businesses. And my vision overall is we need to build an opportunity economy in which we increase opportunity for all, including small business owners. So a lot of my work, even in the Senate, was about increasing access to capital through our small businesses, and in particular through our community banks. So I've been responsible for billions of dollars more now going into our community banks, because they're in the community, and then they know who's in the community and where the talent is and who's doing good in the community, what the community wants. And so part of my plan as president is to give small businesses, startups, a tax deduction of $50,000 to start up. Because right now the tax deduction is $5,000.
Can't do nothing with that.
That's exactly right. And see, the thing we know is that most of our small business, our entrepreneurs who want to start a small business, got a great idea, have incredible work ethic, but they weren't handed a bunch of money on a silver tray. Right. And they just need to get their foot in the door. So there is that. There is what I need to do and what we need to do around making housing and rent more affordable. Part of the problem there is we have a housing supply shortage. My plan includes giving tax incentives for home builders to build 3 million more homes, but
you're going to get $3 million for homeowners to build more homes in communities. Now, that's a while back. I covered a story about California when it comes to zonings when it comes to building 4-family flats and stuff like that. Instead of them actually building 4-family flats, they stop and they build single parent homes to where you only can get one family instead of buying apartments. Now I understand that looking at the projects and apartments like that, you really don't get success. You get only poor people, bad people, and criminals up in it. You know what I'm saying? You get a mixture of good people in there too. And so you get, confusion and corruption. But yet again, to build faster, to build homes, you need to build apartments. Up, long, wide, however you look at it. You really need to build apartments. But yet again, it's the ones that want to, I hate to point fingers at people, but it's the ones that want to bring that hot mess, drug infested.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you sitting there and you trying to get an apartment, you're not gonna tell somebody, "Hey, I need an apartment. I got $1,000 to move in right now." Oh yeah, I do a lot of drugs too. You know what I'm saying? Just want to let you know, I'm gonna have heavy trafficking. I have all my buddies coming in doing drugs, and plus I need the drug man to come in here too. People don't be thinking about that and realizing that that's a major issue that be happening in apartments. But yet again, we need these apartments to make a more affordable homes in these communities.
By the end of my first term, to increase supply to bring down cost, and to increase home ownership.
Why she can't do this now?
Do what?
What is Joe doing that's in your way? Joe, you already done dropped out of race. You're not in an election. What is stopping her from really, really doing this?
Because she's technically not the president yet.
You the vice president. You really think, okay, quick question to you, James. Do you really think Joe is doing anything in the White House right now? Your opinion.
No, Joe chilling. Joe chilling.
Joe chilling. So if you believe Joe is chilling, who do you believe is running the country?
Well, it's supposed to be Joe, but Joe chilling. So I guess it's Kamala. I don't know who running the country, man. I guess the country running itself right now. Because she busy doing campaigning, and he's sitting on the beach. So
my point exactly. If Kamala is running an election, she around here running campaigns, and Joe always getting caught on beach or only getting caught on going up and down airplanes and stuff like that. Who is really running the country? That is a very
the Secretary of State.
He said the states.
No, I said the Secretary of State.
We really? Oh, okay. Let's go. Let's finish up this little quick. Huh?
Go ahead. No, I'm trying to get my laptop so I can use my laptop instead of my phone.
Go ahead.
You good?
Ownership, a $25,000 down payment assistance to friendship to increase supply to bring down cost, and to increase home ownership, a $25,000 down payment assistance to first-time home buyers. Because again, people just need to get their foot in the door.
They'll grind after that.
Right? That's exactly right.
They'll grind after
That's
that.
exactly right. And we know home ownership, especially for the community, that's the fastest, most effective, and most sure ways to.
Why you just cut everybody? You just really would have cut everybody another stimulus check.
Yeah, I could definitely use one right now.
You might well cut another stimulus check, but make it affordable for everybody to get on their feet. She said $5 grand. $5 grand not enough for the. I'm gonna try to make it 50 grand.
No, they don't get us
20
50 grand.
Okay. So cut everybody in America that's a citizen. Let me repeat that again. That's a citizen. Cut everybody a check. Just cut everybody a check. Get it over with. Get it over with.
That's reparations. See, that's people talking about we didn't get our reparations. Yes, we did. It came in the form of a stimulus. Not connected. God damn it.
Byron Donner went on the Breakfast Club yesterday and actually talked about why he wouldn't accept or why we wouldn't pass a recreational a check to give to black people. I wonder if I can find that.
That's reparations.
We got 20 minutes. 20 minutes, Slim Shady. You're on.
No Wi-Fi. Okay. Right. Can you use the laptop?
You can't?
I can't get the I'm using my phone for a hotspot. And it's not connecting to this laptop.
EJ, NV, Just Hilarious, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. Jess is on maternity leave, so Lauren LaRosa is filling in.
So I'm going to translate that to January 6th. The shooter is the one that perpetrated that crime. If you remove qualified immunity, I'm telling you this right now because I've talked with law enforcement officers, that leaves you massively exposed financially. You may, depending on your passion for that project, but then you also sit back and think, now, wait a minute, if something goes wrong, I'm going to be held massively liable. Maybe I need to do something else with my life. Philadelphia. He was a Philadelphia officer.
I'm looking for the part where they was talking about
the money.
Giving a check to black people.
Oh.
And unfortunately, they don't have it broken down here like that. Matter of fact, I know what I can do.
Oh, sorry. Can't see me.
I know what I can do. Because I want to actually cover this real quick. We still got time.
And you haven't supported HR 40. So if you want to talk about the complexities of reparations,
school this panel on the reality of
14 minutes in. Okay. Ooh, I'm right at it. So he finna talk about they finna get into it into the part where I wanted to cover. I had to look it up and luckily I was right there at it. So like I said, you was talking about giving black people a check and stuff like that. He actually burned down and went on here and talked about it, which is funny. So I'm gonna bring that up real quick and cover it. We actually have 15 minutes until the debate. Oops. Actually, the pause did. Yep. We got 20 minutes, 13 minutes into the debate, so
Who is
let me
that?
cover this real
Who is that?
quick.
Ice Cube's son. Who
He
is
said I
that?
was a Fort Myers officer. I asked him, I was like, well, why'd you make the
Right here, this is Baron Donalds. He's the sitting senator for Florida.
Sitting senator. So that means somebody's sick or fucked up.
Why?
Because a sitting senator, he's sitting in for somebody.
He's the senator. He's the sitting senator sitting for Florida. He represents Florida.
Oh, so he. Oh, okay. All right.
He is my pick of choice if I wanted to go all that race hunting, like, oh, I want a black man as president, this who I would pick. Somebody I know that's black, educated, smart, started off in finances, got into government. You know, this would be mine.
Well, what is he?
He's a senator.
No. What's his affiliation?
What you mean?
Is he red? Is he blue? Is he Democrat? What is he?
Oh, he a Republican.
Oh.
I get it.
I kind of figured that's why you endorsed him.
He goes, because up there was no support for me as an officer for what I love to do, which is serve my community. So I said, enough is enough. I'm gonna move. He went to Florida. My sheriff in Florida, he's like, I have more applications coming from officers who are in states or in localities where they're not getting the moral support or whatever they need to continue to do their job day in, day out. And so they're leaving. Well, who does that hurt? That hurts. Who does that really hurt, though, Charlemagne?
Yeah,
because if you don't have officers if you don't have officers on the streets or officers, in urban areas, who's really left in that lurch?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what does qualified immunity have to do with having less police officers?
Because the economic incentive of qualified immunity means that your personal assets aren't gone after if something goes wrong. So, you're in business. When you get involved in a project or a deal that leaves you massively exposed financially, you may, depending on your passion for that project, but then you also sit back and think, now, wait a minute, if something goes wrong, I'm going to be held massively liable. Maybe I need to do something else with my
something
life.
goes wrong, we're talking about people getting violently hurt or killed.
Yeah, clearly.
And I named people that you brushed over.
But it's clear when somebody
brushing over
clearly
that.
violates a constitutional right.
And when you violate a constitutional right, qualified immunity doesn't apply to you. And that's what I'm talking about. It does not. And Angela, don't do that. It does not.
I thought that was the definition. I thought that was the definition.
No, it does
I
not.
thought that was the definition.
No,
of
it does not.
qualified
If you carry yourself outside of the confines of your training and the protocols of that department, qualified immunity doesn't apply to you.
This guy teaches people how to make their first investment in real estate without risking any of their own money. His name is Pace Morby, and he's one of the...
It does
That's not true.
That is very true. That is very
That
true.
is patently
That
false.
is no, it's patently true, and we need to make sure we have that accurate. We cannot make that statement because you have a lot of officers out here who do their job with honor and dignity and respect for the people that they serve.
Listen, qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that protects government officials from civil lawsuits when they perform their jobs unless they clearly violate a constitutional right.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And what is a violation of that right is when they're outside.
Ooh, look at Charlemagne. Look at Charlemagne. This is what I'm talking about, y'all. This is what Republicans or conservatives talk about when you get into a debate and you're being confronted, and then, oh, you want to go so-called do your fact checks, and then you can prove them wrong, and you see how you looking like, okay, where's your clapback? Charlemagne looking for a clapback because he don't have a clapback because he's not that informed. So I understand. But yet again, when somebody's educating and informing you, like, look at her. If you break the immunity code for as a cop, no. You're not getting it. Love it.
The norms of their training and the protocols of that department or that agency.
But here's the main thing, because we can actually go past qualified immunity because this is the place where you...
Oh, now, James.
What?
Now we're going past it. We're not going to stop at it. We're going to go past it. Okay.
You've refused to answer both on Donald Trump's accountability and on the law enforcement that you love so dearly.
Donald Trump
What
and then
we
the law
know
enforcement.
is that He's seeking full immunity, like the same immunity he now has because of the Supreme Court. Because of the corruption of the Supreme Court, we have now gone beyond civil presidential immunity to criminal presidential immunity. He was.
I just want to inform people so people don't think that I'm rude. Miss Lady right here has her own podcast on YouTube. Go look it up. I think it's called The Native Land or something.
That's what it's
I'm
called.
not sure. I'm not 100% sure. I did subscribe to it just so I can get some democratical content. So, you know what I'm saying, to understand how Democrats look at things, to help for me to debate when I do run across somebody who's, you know what I'm saying, informed, and I know how to attack the subject of what we're actually talking about. So I just wanted to let people know that too.
Would like to give that same immunity to law enforcement. True or false?
Well, let's expand that a couple
True
things.
or false?
You can't ask a true or
Because
false,
this
Angela,
is
because
a
you gotta
very
explain the
simple-
details. No, see, this is the
I
problem.
don't want you to explain the details, because when you
Why
explain
you
the
don't
details,
want people
we
to
end
hear
up
the
down the road
details,
and not
Angela?
with
The
facts.
details are what the things that matter. You
What I
gotta
would
explain
like
the
for you to
details,
do
or
is
then you just
answer
talk. You're
true or
just
false,
talking.
and then explain.
If
Can
you
you do that?
don't explain the details, then you're just
Yeah,
talking.
you don't want to say that because you know that it's not true. So
That
let's
is
just
not
move
true.
along.
You want a true or false statement?
Congressman,
Hold on.
I want to know if
I don't
you've
want to
ever
argue with you. I want to
experienced
explain the
racism in
facts.
this country.
Angela, I don't want to argue with you.
I would
want
like to
explain
know
the
if you've
facts.
ever experienced racism in this country, Congressman.
Yeah, actually, I have.
Okay. Do you believe America is a racist country?
No, I don't.
Okay, I believe that that's true because you said in an op-ed on Fox News, as a Black conservative, I, like Senator Scott, agree in our two lives and the lives of many Black men and women like us are living proof that America is indeed no longer a racist nation and by far the best place to reach your fullest potential. And so here's my question. You did, however, vote to support the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, along with every member of the House except for 3 Republicans. So I appreciate your bipartisanship there. And
And
what
who
I
was
do
those 3
know as
Republicans?
well, because America is in fact a racist country.
Who was those 3 Republicans, Mike?
Say that again, James.
I would love to know who those 3 Republicans was. So
Who didn't-
we talking about? We talking about senators, right? So it's 50 of them. It's 50 of the motherfuckers. So that means 47 of them said yeah, and 3 of them was like, hell no. I want to know who the fuck the 3 was.
I actually, you can't look it up.
Was founded
most
on such
likely.
principles. Black men were lynched by the carceral state last week. I'm sure you've heard of Marcellus Williams by now in
Yeah.
Missouri, who was convicted by a nearly all-white jury, and Freddie Owens in South Carolina, who was executed despite his friend recanting testimony that Owens was not in fact there. This is the same state, by the way, that allowed for a firing squad as an execution option. Black people are about 7.5 times more likely to.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have to cut this.
Oh, it's about that time.
It is time for the main event. It is time for the main event. So I am going to take a quick commercial break. We will be back. And we are back. It's that time that we all been waiting for. Matter of fact, I should have got to do one more thing real quick. We are back. Welcome to Instagram, to the live session. Instagram is here. So I had to add them to this real quick. The debate is starting. The countdown is over. We can finally cut down the chase.
Everything we've talked about in the last hour seems like, in a way, Tim Walz, the work for him is on substance. What does he stand for? Defending past positions as governor of Minnesota. And for J.D. Vance, it's about style. It's about likability, about some of the controversial things he said. That seems like where the work is.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. We've made a lot of these points to this point. One other point that I would just add to this conversation is, remember how this whole campaign started, where age was the big issue? Joe Biden was going to be 86 at the end of a second term. Right now, Donald Trump is 78 years old. His age means there's a little bit unique attention being focused on J.D. Vance right now. He's 40. You're going to see Tim Walz, who is 60 years old today. The last time there was a big age discrepancy like this, 1988, Lloyd Benson and Dan Quayle, who was 41, a year older, of course, then.
So they better stop bringing that age stuff when we talk about
Vance has
Trump.
been senator for 2 years.
And the gist is that was one of the rare moments where a line broke through. You know, I knew John F. Kennedy. You know John F. Kennedy. These moments rarely break through. Is there a viral moment like that that sort of defines this night, or is
this the vice president? I thought the president was that.
Question with 3 minutes to go.
No,
Debates matter.
they ain't gonna be no more president debates.
They can matter. Think about back in 2012.
If they have one more, it's going to be on the 28th
had a very
of
strong debate
October.
performance against
But this
Paul
is
Ryan.
the vice president's doing it, right?
Yeah, that's the only one.
Obama
Yeah.
stumbled in his first debate against Mitt Romney. So yes, they can matter. Again, I think.
Man, I
this takes
thought
on
Kamala and
outsized
goddamn Trump was
meaning
about to go at it.
because of
Damn.
the fact that there's no second presidential debate. One more point. In listening to those voters that Kate was talking to,
We already
each of them
seen
seemed
that.
So frustrated with the process, and you think about that word.
No, but she want another
right
one.
now, Vice President Kamala Harris wins on the change.
Why you think she
argument
want
by 9
another one?
points. I think that's part of the work that J.D. Vance is going to try to
Well,
do.
change is interesting because she's an incumbent,
Mhm.
as former President Trump. That's right. So it's interesting to see
You
that.
only want to do something over if you didn't
Vice
win.
presidential debates.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they didn't when elections weren't decided by 10,000 voters
That's
in a
exactly
Midwest
right.
state.
In 2 different states, and that's it. I come back to something that you have said from the jump, Savannah, through this election cycle, which is let's have a little bit of humility here, right? It's hard for us to predict, especially with the race this close, especially with the dynamic of no next debate for the presidential candidates.
All right, come on, man. The
Remember what
countdown
this race
over
is going
with.
to come down to those 6 critical battlegrounds: the economy and immigration. We have seen that consistently in the polling. Expect to hear both of those issues hammered big time on stage tonight.
And worth noting also, this is the first presidential election since Roe was overturned. I think that's going to be an X factor too.
Mics will be on tonight. Is that going to make a huge difference in terms of expectations based on what we saw in the presidential debate?
Remember, it was the Harris campaign that in the presidential debate wanted the mics to be on throughout here. This time, they are on throughout. CBS can turn them off as necessary, but it's that back and forth. They're hoping that you can hear those snide comments, perhaps by either side.
Show of hands, who thinks there will be another debate between Trump and Harris?
Listen to you at this show of hands.
Show of hands. It's a quick poll. Okay.
I think we
Who
think
thinks there should be?
We're journalists. We think there should be.
Okay, all right, there we go.
Oh, should be.
At the top of the hour now, 9 p.m. here in New York City. We are just seconds away from tonight's only vice presidential debate between Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
That's right. It is also potentially, if you haven't noticed, possibly the last debate we will see election day. Election day now just 35 days away, 5 weeks.
We have kind of set the table here on what people will be looking at and what we'll all be talking about in a little while. We will have in-depth analysis once the debate concludes here on NBC. But tonight's event is hosted by CBS News in their studio in New York, just a few blocks from here.
Yeah, and as the last debate was between the running mates
it's
Donald
hosted
Trump
by
and Kamala
CBS?
Harris, there's no audience in there tonight. So each candidate is going to have 2 minutes
Don't
for
tell me
their
I gotta go to
answers, and then there's a
CBS.
rebuttal. And the moderators have said, Lester, there will be some fact-checking, but they're really counting on the candidates to fact-check each other.
And as we noted, unlike the last debate, microphones will not be muted, but the network says they reserve the right to mute the candidates. So that'll be an interesting process as they go along.
Okay, the vice presidential debate about to be on. Let's go to CBS Network Studios, West 57th, here in the heart of Manhattan, and watch this debate.
Presidential debate.
Check this out. State Farm was charged with $170 million.
Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
So we got a senator going against the governor.
In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Are picketing. We're going to begin tonight
That's
with
over
the
here.
Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. What's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea. When we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel?
I forget about
it was
October
during
1st,
the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald
Y'all
Trump's
forget about
tweets,
today. Y'all
but
did it.
effective,
Y'all doing a
smart
debate on a
diplomacy
tragic
and
that
peace
happened out here
through
in Las
strength
Vegas.
is how you
What
bring
happened out
stability
there?
back to a very broken world.
A mass
Donald
shooting
Trump
at
has
Mandalay
already done
Bay.
it once before. Ask
Oh,
yourself,
for real? Why don't on the news?
when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major
How many
conflict
people got
break out?
killed?
The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to.
If I'm not
Nora?
mistaken,
Margaret,
like
thank
15
you.
to 20 people.
Let's turn now to
Damn.
Hurricane Helene. The storm could be
This happened today?
one of the deadliest on record.
No,
More
October
than 160 people
1st.
are dead and hundreds
Today is
more
October
are
1st.
missing. Scientists say climate
2017.
change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because
You
of
talking
the
about the dude that shot the people
rainfall.
from the goddamn
Senator
hotel
Vance, according
hotel
to
room?
CBS News polling, 7 in 10
Oh, okay.
Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to
with the
try and
climate change
reduce
this
the
fast?
impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world.
That's who the fuck he looks like. He look like Bob Hope, bro.
More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in
Walz
some of the
Vance.
dirtiest parts of the entire
Vance
world.
is
And when I say
talking
that, I
down.
mean
Walz is
the
looking.
amount of carbon
The
emissions
dude on
we're
the
doing
dude on the
with
right.
economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
I'm glad he said
Governor
clean
Walz, you have
water.
2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him, he's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true, don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed, you've got hospitals that are overwhelmed, you have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
we're
because
going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys
economy,
weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to
CBP
have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut.
We
have
can hear
so
you.
much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts, but if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a
show
gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Okay.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks, She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, Why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did during when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Man. Okay, so the first half of this are in the books. Tim Walz he came out nervous. He was nervous. Now he done broken on. He ain't done warmed up and stuff like that. He broken in. Vance is holding it down. Holding it down. I like how not letting them, making sure he get all his words off. Y'all not finna hold me up. Y'all not finna just say this and get away with this. Notice how they're pressuring Vance with the questions too, and they're not. A lot of people gonna be like they was fact checking them, or the questioning is like his follow up questioning that they want to question him be like a fact check question. So that's basically what you seen during the debate. I did like that. You really got to see like what's going on, and the fact that they said that vice presidents are in there making the last decisions and qualified decisions and last decisions in there. So you looking at this, I'm looking at that. I'm like, okay, cool. So she made the last decision, or she be in there for the last decision. Therefore, these plans that she's trying to put into place, and I'm talking about Kamala, the plans that she's trying to put in place, you could have been put in place. The border crisis that is happening, that you say that you are trying to clean up, that you need to put in place, you can put into place. You can't say it's not, because I'm saying that it is. Y'all saying Trump did without Congress. So if he did it without Congress, you can do it without Congress. I think that Vance whooping ass, man. Vance is whooping ass. I hope it keep going like this. They is getting through a lot of questions. I like the little back and forth they did have until they cut off the mics, just showing, what I'm saying, little man, testosterone. Testosterone. You got to show testosterone and showing who's boss and showing how leadership is. Who's going to sit up here and control the room? Now, some of the people are going to be looking at Vance like, oh, he's over controlling the room. See? And they're going to relate things deep. They're going to be, boy, I can't wait till tomorrow. I cannot wait till tomorrow. It's going to be okay. Pretty good fashions and lashes. I cannot wait. CNN, NBC, and all those guys, man, they're gonna be hitting. Yeah, I know the after report after this is where the thunder really go down. It's where I wish I can put up like 3 screens or 3 networks and just mute them all 3 and then go down when they're going live good into something, because man, they're gonna have the panel, their discussion, and then they're gonna have the who won group, their little group. I'm gonna be skeptical about them groups. You know what I'm saying? I do. Oh, they're back, y'all.
Violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where My shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants
true. And again,
that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people, whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is— So you think the
individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually she had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
That boy handling them. That boy jabbing them. Boy, you can't just come to us and say what you want to say. I like Vance. I didn't know him at first. I didn't know nothing about him, but now I'm like, that boy on point. That boy on point. firm with his answers, straight to the point, hit you with facts, don't overtalk. Yeah. I was sleeping on it, boy. Y'all was sleeping. We got to figure it out. We got to see what type of person they is. Now, Tim Walz is questionable because he keeps, like, I don't know, can I say like a pouty kid? Like a big pouty kid? When you see him? When you hear him talk? I think that's what I be getting out of him when I hear him talk. I get like a big pouty kid, somebody who's I'm not saying triggered, just like, oh man, you can't be saying it, man. You can still tell that he's still nervous, especially on certain topics. You can tell that he's nervous. So it's I don't know. I think Vance wins, me personally, but you know, people gonna be like, hey man, you're a Trump supporter. But what do you think? Put down in the comments what you think about this debate so far. Like I said, I think Tim Walz sound like I hate to say it like a little pouty kid, but that's the vibe he's giving. The pouty kid vibe. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's up to y'all. Take it how you. I don't know. I guess take it how you want. Don't be too ashamed. He's not the one to blame. I don't know. He's up there debating like, did he really get picked to do this? Did he throw his name in the hat? Did Tim Walz actually like throw his name in the hat like, I'm really finna do this? This is what I want. Or did they came to him like, hey, look, check this out. You the best candidate. Go for it. Go on, get up in there. Go on, be VP. Plus, his standards aren't there. So, yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. Wondering. Hold on, y'all. I'm trying to do something. Wondering. I'm really waiting for the after panel. Oh, they're back. I'm sorry, y'all.
If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Their Stars, I appreciate it. But look, all of you, thank you.
Allowed Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Their Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
A handshake, and that's the end. Tim Walz, J.D. Vance squaring off for about 90 minutes in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, the CBS News studios, as their families come out to greet them after what was really a quite civilized debate. And perhaps that's one of the headlines we'll talk about as we turn to meet the press moderator, Kristen Welker, and Hallie Jackson, our senior Washington correspondent. Lester here still with me in New York City. I really am struck. We had kind of like a good old-fashioned policy debate on the issues. Didn't get nasty.
Well, by the way, they're still chatting.
Still chatting. Didn't get weird. You know, they took their shots, but it was earnest. And there were even moments of kind of congeniality and collegiality.
There were a number of moments where each of the candidates turned to each other and said, I agree with you. When Governor Walz said that his child had witnessed a shooting, You heard Senator Vance say, I'm so sorry that that happened. Look, zooming out, it was clear, I think, that Senator J.D. Vance knew his challenge tonight was to come off as more likable. I received a number of texts from Republicans and Democrats who say he was very effective at doing that. He's coming off as normal, even compassionate, even on the issue of abortion and economy, one Democrat said to me. And then at the end of the night, something very significant happened, which is that Governor Walz turned to Senator Vance and said, did Trump lose the 2020 election? Vance said, I'm focused on the future. Walz said, that's a damning answer. I do think
he said
that
it's a damning non-answer.
Non-answer. And I do think that exchange and non-answer will in some ways loom very large over what Democrats and Republicans agree was a strong night for Senator Vance.
Hallie, what was the most memorable moment for you?
I think there were a few of them. I think the one that Kristen mentions is one of them. I think the idea that the mics were, not muted at one point and then muted, and Senator Vance taking exception to that. Governor Walz calling himself kind of a knucklehead when asked to speak about an instance in which he says he misspoke about China, and an answer that was tough to follow there. I think overall, I was like you, Lester, watching the two of them interact at the end there, because there was this sense of civility that we certainly did not see on that debate stage between the people at the top of the ticket here.
Talk about
What's also interesting
Arby
here is the way that Senator Vance very specifically and repeatedly linked Kamala Harris to Tim Walz. Both of them seemed very clear that they know what this is about, right? This is about the principles. This isn't necessarily
Even
about
at the end, they both said, vote for Kamala Harris.
That's
vote
exactly
for Donald
right.
Trump,
And on the
vote
other
for
side,
me.
too. I mean, J.D. Vance said Kamala Harris's name 38 times. That is way more than Donald Trump ever said Kamala Harris's name.
A lot of people don't really know who these two men are.
Yeah, that's right. We talk about this being an introduction to America. You heard a lot of policy. You heard some substance there, too. So you probably have some level of takeaway if you ended up watching for the full 90 minutes. But I do think that as things move forward, I had one Democrat text me, listen, substantive, but also can't imagine this changes a whole lot in the race moving forward.
And I think the biography is important. That's why you heard both of them pause at various moments throughout the night to reintroduce themselves to Americans, to explain where they had come from, the fact that they both have served in the military, and to try to really paint themselves as people who can relate to moderates, to independents, to those suburban voters who are going to.
The closing moments, the closing arguments are always so interesting because that's the only thing they get to plan, rehearse, memorize if they want to. And they both struck a note of optimism about the future in the country. And with J.D. Vance, frankly, it was a stark contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump, who says this country is going to HE double toothpicks, it's all terrible.
You can say the word.
Okay, hell, sorry. I don't know if my kids were still awake. But, it was interesting to see him strike that tone because it's in contrast to what we hear from Donald Trump every day.
And he himself just over the weekend said, yeah, this is a dark speech. I know that I'm giving a dark speech.
Donald
Trump did at a campaign rally he was at. He understands that that is the tone he's striking, and it was markedly different.
All right, let's see what other folks are thinking about what we've just witnessed. Kate Snow has been talking to a group of voters in battleground Pennsylvania. Kate, what's the consensus? What are you hearing?
Right here, boy.
Oh, Lester, it's really interesting. We've just been chatting since the debate ended. We are in Pennsylvania, right, guys? And we talked about how you feel the pressure that this is a swing area and that you could actually decide this election. So, Brian, let me start with you because you were really torn going in before the debate. You talked about not knowing exactly what you want to do. How are you feeling now?
I feel like Walz probably hit it on the head a lot of times. It's probably 60-40.
60-40 for Harris?
For Harris, yeah. I feel like Vance sort of danced around a lot of questions. That it's not really going to. The vice president debate is really not going to have any kind of meaning on how I vote. But
as you sit here now, do you have more certainty about how you're going to vote, or not really?
No, not really. No. But I do think that Walz sort of he was really for the people, right? And Vance did a lot of deflecting and a lot of he just really wasn't sure. He kind of danced around answers. So
Brandon, you said you felt like Vance was just saying the thing. What were your words? He was saying things that people wanted to hear?
It sounded like he was saying things that people wanted to hear. He sounds like he was trying to be more human. This does not necessarily align to what he said before, in my opinion.
And you said that now you are feeling a little more certain about going with Harris. Am I reading that right?
Yes. Now it's October 1st. I think it's irresponsible to have this much uncertainty coming out of either side. Vance did nothing. He did not answer the question for me. And he made a lot of connections that weren't really there for me.
Claire, we were talking a lot afterwards about childcare, because there was that whole section toward the end of the debate about childcare, and you're really involved in this as a member of the community here. You're a mom. You're involved in policy discussions. What was your take on that?
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for NBC for having us. But I was really interested in just again, I feel like we're looking at two men telling us what women are going to do, and I'm still not there. I still feel like we need more representation. We need more of who I want to see. We need more people who can break down systemic differences that stop our government for either party being able to make effective policy. So after tonight, I still feel like a little unwary about exactly who I will be voting for, and if I will be voting at all.
And if you will be voting at all. Well, I'm sure both sides, both of those men would have said, please vote if you can. John.
I just want to add to that point, again, we have two men discussing issues that are, have to do with women's rights and whatnot. But let's not forget that the person at the top of the ticket for the Democrats is a woman, and she has a lot to say, which maybe that will help.
And we know that you support Harris. John, I know quickly you also said the economic plans that you heard tonight cost a lot more than you expected.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear the price number that the Wharton School of Business attributed to Kamala's plan. But then when I heard that Trump's plan was 3 times that, I was pretty much shocked with that number.
Rona, you were considering voting for Trump now?
I didn't learn anything in this debate that kind of helped me reach a conclusion. I was really happy with both of their answers about Israel at the very beginning. But I had a crazy day today. I started this morning interviewing Aviva Siegel, former hostage whose husband, Keith Siegel, an American, is still held hostage in Gaza, along with another 6 Americans and over 100 others. And no one addressed that at all. No one addressed rising anti-Semitism on college campuses. I have more homework to do. Thanks.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all so much for sitting with us and for watching. Lester, I'll send it back to you guys.
Fascinating, Kate. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right, let's go back to Tom Yamas. He's in the spin room. Have you been spun, Tom?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the spinning is just starting. The room is also starting to fill up now. I'm just looking over my shoulder to see who's here of the surrogates. We have Senator Tom Cotton is here, Representative Elise Stefanik, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, Senator Mark Kelly, and others. It sounds like we're also hearing our first sort of post-debate strategies. The Republicans are leaning into that moment that Hallie was talking about earlier, where Governor Walz was asked about his comments that were misleading about his time in China during the Tiananmen Square protest, that he called himself a knucklehead and that he misspoke. Republicans are going very hard over that. Democrats, in turn, are saying that the lies that the Vance campaign and the Trump campaign say are nowhere in comparison to that. We're also hearing a bigger debate right now about immigration. It sounds like both sides are fighting over immigration, what Vance said and what Walz said about their immigration plans, and who's to blame over the immigration crisis right now at the border and how it's changing. So I think we're sort of getting our first salvos in the war post-debate and what we're hearing here in the spin room. I also want to note we do see Secret Service in here, which leads us to believe that at least one of the two candidates who debated tonight will enter the spin room and hopefully do some interviews once they get done speaking to their own campaigns. For now, I'm going to send it to you guys as the spinning is just getting started.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. I want to turn now to Kristen Welker, Hallie Jackson, and Peter Alexander has joined the table. Let's get some final thoughts. Peter, you're writing your story for the Today Show tomorrow. You literally are writing your story for the Today Show tomorrow. But what's the headline to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest headlines, at least in the eyes of the Walz campaign, came in the 90th minute. It was the most contentious moment of the debate. It was on the topic of democracy, an issue that Joe Biden focused so much attention on, but it seemed to be by the wayside as it became a Trump versus Harris race right now. According to the people I'm speaking to in the Harris-Walz camp right now, they say their dial groups, the folks who say if they like something or don't like it, thought that was the worst moment for J.D. Vance. They didn't like his non-answer, his refusal to say whether, in fact, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in 2020 right now. They're going to try to make some hay out of that. Right now, we're already seeing what the Trump people are trying to make hay out of. It was a gaffe by Tim Walz, who himself said sometimes he has a tendency to misspeak tonight when he said that he's friends with school shooters. He meant to say, of course, that he's friends with school shooting victims. But I do think that's a key moment. And certainly I think it's a moment where they think after a night where in the eyes of the Walz folks, they think he came off Vance came off a bit slick tonight, Yale educated. They thought that their guy, Walz, was a bit more plain spoken along the way. Again, I go back to where I started on this, though. It's not so much how you viewed what happened tonight, but it's how these are diced and sliced and how people see little moments from this tonight.
Yeah, what will people be talking about a few days from now?
Exactly
about
right.
This debate? Will
Yeah.
they be talking about this debate?
Well, I do think that democracy thing is something that the Harris and Walz folks are going to try to lay into heavy out of this. They think it was their best moment over the course of
But what about, let's talk about Walz's worst moment, which has to be, I would think, the part where he was asked about misstatements he's made about whether or not he was at Tiananmen Square in China. And he was sort of all over the place. Instead of just saying, look, I
I was waiting on
misspoke.
somebody to
And
talk about that.
are we really talking about this thing that happened 35 years ago? So, but this are the kind of things that stick from debates like this. He said, I'm a knucklehead.
Absolutely. And Democrats reached out to say that was not a strong moment. It's worth noting this entire debate really seemed focused on trying to pin each other for being the incumbent. Remember, voters are looking for
Show of hands, who thinks there's going to be another debate? Nobody. What about you,
don't think
Lester?
either side, I'll leave it to you guys. You don't think there's a chance that they're going to feel they need it?
We've covered Donald Trump for a long time. There's always a chance, but right now it doesn't look like
All right,
it.
well, that concludes our coverage of tonight's vice presidential debate.
We will have more coverage ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now. Full wrap up tomorrow on Today.
Hey, good evening. I'm Tom Yamas. Our coverage of the first and only vice presidential debate on NBC News Now is just getting started. My colleague Hallie Jackson will join me in just a moment. I'm live from the Spin Room in New York City, where we'll hear from some top advisors to both campaigns and from undecided battleground voters. The big question, were any minds changed tonight? You see this handshake right here between the two candidates in a debate that kicked off with a question on the unfolding situation in the Middle East, with Senator J.D. Vance defending former President Trump's approach to the region while he was president. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. And Governor Tim Walz attacking the former president, saying many of his former national security advisors have spoken out against him.
It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous.
Make it try to look good.
The debate also featuring some tense moments, such as Vance going after the moderators after they tried to fact check him about the legal status of Haitian immigrants in his home state.
Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status. Nora?
Thank
you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
As for Governor Walz, he stumbled through an answer on some discrepancies in past comments he made on China, seeming to admit he misspoke in the past about when he actually visited the country.
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times.
There were a couple.
Did that kill him? Did that kill him in the debate, calling his own self a knucklehead at the time, saying that he misspoke by something that he served, that people take so much pride in doing, serving this country? I'm gonna bring it over here to CBS. Bring it over here to CBS, man. I'm gonna give y'all a little bit more in depth and analysis of the same things of what I'm saying and what I was hearing too. I was about to mess up, yeah. Ooh, caught myself.
take him a little while to hit his stride there. I think the campaign does feel, though, that once he did get into that stride, that his plain-spoken style certainly resonates. They feel that he did a good job hitting the issues, articulating the issues, and they feel he did a good job constantly linking back to Donald Trump. At several points, even highlighting daylight between what Vance was arguing and what Donald Trump stands for. They especially feel that moment at the end where Vance was describing what happened on January 6th and his refusal to say, who won the election, that was a strong moment for the Harris-Walz ticket. I will say, you did see over and over again Senator Vance trying to argue and back that Kamala Harris is still in office and that she should have done all of these things over the last 3.5, 4 years. It's unclear whether that will resonate, but it is interesting that you constantly heard J.D. Vance going back and arguing that she's not the change candidate because she's currently in office, trying to get at that central argument of the Harris-Walz ticket. But there's a reason that I think the old adage of VP debates is do no harm. They certainly feel that Walz did not do that he did a good job at articulating the case and presenting the issues at the heart of their campaign.
John, you heard what the Harris campaign is saying tonight, that the January 6th moment they believe was one of the strongest moments for Governor Walz that came well into this debate.
90 minutes in by my count.
But it was still quite a moment.
It was, but first, David, I got to say, I think that Walz did seem unsteady. And frankly, what I saw in Walz is somebody who has not faced questions on a national stage since he became the Democratic nominee. He was simply out of practice. I mean, I don't know why they've done it, but they've kept him out of the limelight. They've kept him away from reporters. They haven't had him do any interviews. And he was clearly unsteady through much of that debate. And in contrast, J.D. Vance was very smooth. He took the arguments not to Walz. He was very respectful of Walz, took it to Kamala Harris. Overall, a tone of civility in this debate in an election that has been anything but civil.
I was struck on that point, though, John. Repeatedly, both of them said to each other, well, I appreciate what you just said there, and then went to sort of claim their separate stances on whatever the issue was in the moment. But they said it a number of times in different ways, but both acknowledging the other standing on that stage.
Yeah, and you just don't hear that anymore. And J.D. Vance did a very good job on taking the policy questions, including ones that were going to be very difficult for him, and pivoted back to make the points he wanted to make. But at the end of the debate, 90 minutes in, a reminder that this is not a normal election. This is not simply an election that is about policy debates. This is an election that features a candidate who is trying to return to office after having refused to accept the defeat in the last election and trying to overturn a Democratic presidential election.
I like how he said that this is not about policy, but this is what I be trying to talk, marijuana, smoking weed, so we not, us potheads, don't think that we're dumb. But you got to understand, it's about policies. This is what you voting for. I don't want you to vote on Kamala or Trump over feelings. Or I feel like, no, I really want you to do your research, which policies fit your need that you want to grow America, you and your economy, your kids, and your family. I really want that. I don't want people to come up here and shame your intelligence and say, oh, it's not about policies. Don't worry about policies. Don't worry about a man remembering or speaking correctly to somebody when it's all said and done. And you got to think about it. When you speaking to these world leaders and stuff like that, and you speak out of tone out of something, what's going to happen to you? Do we got to come get you? You know, I don't want to put a person like Tim Walz in harm's way because I feel like he wouldn't be able to really think himself out of it. You know, he say something incorrectly, he's just gonna keep rolling with the punches and not really think about what he said and try to correct himself. Even if it comes time to correct himself, he's not gonna correct himself. Oh man, I just misspoke. Let's keep talking. Let's keep moving. Okay, so that's how you. If you do your team like that, hey Johnny, you know, because what he teach football, he called a wrong play, and everybody's looking at him. Hey man, you called a wrong play. Hey, y'all just called a wrong play. Don't worry about it. Let's keep going. How many wrong plays have you called? So I really want y'all to really think about your policies, economy, taxes, groceries, gas, climate change, if you want to believe in climate change, but climate change, border, security, police, brutality. Think about that.
Something we've never seen in this country through our 258 years or however many years. It was striking to me that we didn't hear the words mentioned Mike Pence. Mike Pence, who of course was Donald Trump's vice president. Mike Pence, who is not supporting Donald Trump in large part because Donald Trump on January 6th helped to unleash a mob that attacked the Capitol that went literally to chants of hang Mike Pence, calling for the execution of Mike Pence because he refused to go along with Donald Trump's attempts to illegally overturn that election. So when it finally came up, you heard from J.D. Vance. Again, a reminder, not a policy debate here. J.D. Vance has said that he would not do what Mike Pence did, that he would not have stood up to Donald Trump, that he would have done what Donald Trump wanted him to do. And he reiterated that. And that was, I think, a very important moment, but it came at the very end of this debate.
Which is why the Harris campaign is bringing that to your attention, and other reporters as well. Rachel Scott, what does the Trump campaign think about J.D. Vance, and in particular, the former president, who was also on social media tonight during the debate?
Yeah, former President Donald Trump was watching this live in real time. He said right before the debate that he would call out his own running mate if he made a mistake. Tonight, the former president is calling this a steady and strong performance by his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. He mocked Governor Tim Walz, calling him nervous at some points. The amount of pressure that was on Senator J.D. Vance heading into this was also remarkable here because the campaign is keenly.
We all seen it. It's not like you didn't see that this guy looked nervous. Not like we didn't see it. We seen it. He looked nervous at the time. He looked at I don't want to say starstruck, but that's the best way to say he looked at starstruck. He looked at not prepared for the moment. He could have did all the practicing, which people say he did practice, but he wasn't ready. It was too much to do.
Aware that Senator J.D. Vance does not have notably high favorability approval ratings when it comes to how he's viewed by the American people, given all those controversial headlines about him. So yes, the goal here was to defend Donald Trump, but in a way was also try to reach across the aisle to appeal maybe to some of those undecided voters. And I think there were a few points where that came across tonight, especially on the issue of abortion rights. Here you had Senator J.D. Vance from Ohio, a state that actually voted in favor of protecting abortion rights against his own viewpoint. And he said that Republicans need to do a better job on this issue, that they need to earn the trust of American voters on this issue. That's not something that we're hearing very many Republicans going around saying, especially given that Donald Trump appointed three of the Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. Lastly, David, on this point, I was texting with some Republicans over on Capitol Hill. You know, the last debate, I think a lot of Republicans felt like there was this missed opportunity for Donald Trump in which he was not going back to Vice President Kamala Harris and saying, you are in the White House right now with President Biden. Why didn't you do this now when you had the chance? Tonight, Vance did that.
Lindsay, I was struck by that as well. I think it was something that the team working with Donald Trump had hoped he had done during the presidential debate more than he did. J.D. Vance said it repeatedly tonight, saying, listen, she's had nearly 4 years to do that as vice president. Why hasn't she?
I feel like that was really effective. But I think overall tonight, if you're an undecided voter in America, I don't know that you come away with tonight with an additional clarity. It kind of reminded me of the June 27th debate when Kamala Harris that night said of Joe Biden, it was a slow start, but a strong finish. And that's how I felt that Tim Walz kind of did tonight. You know, to use Tim Walz's own words, I mean, a lot about this debate tonight was weird. There were uncomfortable, cringy moments. But overall, I think my takeaway was something that Reince Priebus said on the outset, which was that J.D. Vance needed to come away as that humble, likable guy from Hillbilly Elegy. It seemed like he did perhaps get some points in that
Lindsay,
area.
let me take it right to Reince Priebus. You bring him up. We got 30 seconds for you and Donna tonight. Reince, your reaction? How did he do, your candidate, J.D. Vance?
I thought he did really well. He did exactly as Lindsay said. But most importantly, he went head on against this narrative that he's this snarky, unlikable guy. And he talked about the American dream and his life in the beginning and the end. Walz lied about Tiananmen Square, and he couldn't get his story straight. So I thought he did wonderfully tonight.
And Donna Brazile, your reaction? How did you think Governor Walz did?
Well, you know, as a school teacher, I thought he did very well. He deserved high marks for explaining sometime the difficulty of trying to figure out where J.D. Vance and Donald Trump stands on the important issues. Look, the governor had to do one thing tonight, and that was to close the deal with voters. And I think he did that for Kamala Harris.
Donna Brazile, our thanks to you. Martha, do you think the voters heard enough about the issues and real solutions tonight?
Boy, we talked to those voters earlier tonight. They heard everything they would want to hear, I would assume, about those issues, because as we've all said tonight, it was a very civil debate. No real strong attacks.
We'll be right back with the final thought right after the break.
Monday night on ABC. Said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House.
Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for?
Was actually very critical of Walz's performance tonight, telling us Vance is much better at this than Walz. I don't think it matters much, and there's good moments for both sides. But if I have a frustration, is that I don't know what Walz's strategy was tonight. He said his advice to him would have been, you have one job. Goad Trump into debating the VP again. Let it rip. Now, we have heard from some of those people close to Harris who referred to the performance as, quote, admirable. The DNC chairman, Jamie Harrison, is just across the room here. We spoke to him a minute ago. He said that it was a great performance, that Vance went to law school and was a great debater. And then, of course, the Trump campaign has many people here in the room as well. Donald Trump Jr. is here in the spin room. J.D. Vance had already planned to be in the spin room earlier today. He is now here sitting down talking to one of the other outlets. A senior Trump campaign official telling us Donald Trump is thrilled with J.D. He also thinks Walz is a lightweight who can't be the one person who will be a heartbeat away from the presidency. Quote, you want that guy running the country, ? So that is a lot of what we're hearing in here. A lot of the people just coming into the room, the spin room, Lindsay, as you know, just starting to get spinning.
Right. And tonight was certainly a big night for Governor Tim Walz to try to contrast his background against Senator.
Seen enough. Y'all seen enough. We seen enough. We did. Yes. Tomorrow we'll continue this. Until next time, y'all.